Thank you, Mira.
All right. All right, there we go.
All right. Good morning to you both.
Hello.
Savage, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us. Mira, I'm always excited to be here with you. So I want to introduce you. Gerald Savage is a music educator. He's a musicologist, a composer. You also play the trombone and other instruments. You're an educator, which is very important, or you're a researcher and a sound therapist. And I'm sure you have a lot to teach us. I did listen to one of your YouTubes talks about what was it? The practicing. What was it? I do not have it in front of me, but you have two different terminologies for a DNA of sound and the chemistry of sound, which are fascinating to me for me to dive into. But you take it, you probably want to introduce us, and then wherever you like to take us, we'll be happy to hear.
All right. First of all, thank you very much for asking me, inviting me to come here. I'm always delighted and excited and passionate about being able to have the opportunity, a forum in which to share just a little bit of what I'm all about and my philosophies on sound healing and my philosophies on health and wellness as well. Because, this journey started off as being one of a musical nature. As a person who played instruments in high school, as you mentioned, trombone was my first instrument. And then shortly after I started playing piano, and eventually it morphed into, of course, being a music major and learning all of the theory and the knowledge and the technique and that goes along with being a music major. And very, very beneficial for me was the fact that I grew up in the Black church tradition. In the Black church tradition, it's not a written lineage or legacy, I should say. However, the music is very, very much an integral part of the culture. And in fact, as a side note, I venture to say that Black American music is probably the most dominant musical force on the planet at this point in time in our modern times. If you're talking about jazz, blues, gospel, funk, hip hop, Motown, on, they all grew out of the church tradition. So this is a very, very powerful musical tradition. And then when you get to university, you all of a sudden have the opportunity to learn let's say the literature of music, the written music, the language of music on a page. And by the way, I'll say more about that in a minute because I don't believe music exists on a page. But that's where there's a lot of focus when you're talking about the European approach to music. It's a very literal tradition. However, I don't believe for 1 minute that Mozart and Bach and Beethoven did not improvise. I think they knew the language of music, and of course, in their jobs as church musicians, and of course, that's how you got work during those days. They wrote down something so that a group of musicians, of course, when you have a group of musicians playing together, you have to have an organized way of doing that. So training in university gave me that world. And also, as I proceeded in my studies, I started to learn music from other cultures. Now, once again, even in the classical tradition, you have composers like Debussy, for instance, who studied world music and incorporated some of those elements into what he did. And also from that standpoint of looking at other cultures and what we would call the more native cultures of the world, music was very functional in that everything had a purpose, whether it was for birth or death or some type of celebration or planting or harvesting, whatever it may be. Then all of a sudden, music to me started to look a different way. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't get a little bit of that when I was growing up. Actually, a lot of that in the Black church tradition, because once again, the music is a very powerful force, and it is the motivator. It's it's the thing that gets people moving. It's the thing that helps people to celebrate, which is all very healing. And so when I started to study world music per se, then it became very clear that there was something beyond just music for entertainment. Now, once again, going briefly to the European tradition, it's about the audience and it's about the performer. And there's a separation. Once again, in the native cultures and the culture I grew up in, the Black church, it's a participatory activity. Everybody participates. It's a unified, it's not a performance, it's a collection of people doing what they do together. Eventually, I found out about the Globe Institute of Sound and Consciousness program in San Francisco, and signed up for that program, and then started to delve deeper into the aspects of music and sound therapy, and eventually got my certification through Globe Institute, and then took it from there and started my own practice. And that just led to one thing to another, and now everything has come to a point. However, I have to say one more thing, and that is that throughout this journey, I've also had a very strong affinity towards natural health and healing. So when you combine those two things, then you have something totally different. However, when you look at, and I can't speak for everyone else, but sound therapy for me is just one aspect of a much, much, much bigger universe of vibration and frequency. And then when you tie all that together, it's a work in progress, it's a big work, but at the same time, it becomes a matter of not simply, at least in my practice, soundpill.net, my practice is not one of just sound and music, even though that's a very, very important part. That's, I guess you could say, the center of the hub of the wheel, because there's many other aspects of health and wellness that come out of that. And I would even say in some respects, sound and music therapy comes as a spoke of the bigger health and wellness, natural health and wellness. So what I do is I work with sound, vibration, frequency, and all of these are tied into health and wellness. Frequency of a vibrational life is really enormous, and this is what I really work with my clients on, and actually people who I know in general, is that when you're talking about health and wellness, you're talking about vibrational living. Vibrational living is the food that you eat, the soil that it's grown in, the water that we drink, it's the thoughts that we think, it's the emotions that we feel, it's the company that we have. And recently what I've been focusing on even more so, in addition to everything else, is the fabrics we wear. And I just read about the study in which linen is very high vibration. Okay, so as opposed to polyester, which is dead. You know, fresh food versus packaged food, processed food is going to be lower vibrationally. So all of these things are important. And when you're talking about vibration and frequency, and just the word of frequency, you're talking about a repetition of a particular vibration or waveform or whatever it may be. And then that is the habit that we end up clicking into, you know, whether it's the way that we think about the world, the way we think about ourselves. You know, most of us are poisoned from our youth, you know, I just recently reread the 4 Agreements, and, you know, it talks about he talks about the fact that we have all been, you know, toxically poisoned, as young people from the world that we live in. And of course, that's what we're working out of. But that is a vibration, that what we think about ourselves, whether that's a higher vibration or lower vibration, is what we think about ourselves into connection with others, the connection to the universe. The words that we speak, and you think about writing, and you think about reading, and what do we learn when we're young people? We learn how to spell. And that word is very significant because we don't think about how through our writing, through our words, through our thoughts, we are creating some kind of spell, whether it's high vibrationally or whether it's lower vibrationally. So taking all of those things into play, then this is where music is used, and frequency and vibration and sound as a way of either entraining, bringing a lower vibration or a vibration that's not wanted, that's not needed, that's not useful into alignment, or bringing things into their resonant frequency, because everything in the universe has a resonant frequency. However, this is another important point that is not often spoken about, and that is how our frequencies are always changing. Even within a certain range of what we call the resonant frequency, it's always changing. So therefore, what the need is in terms of what we do and what I do as a sound therapist is going to change depending on the individual and where they are. And there's so many factors that go into play there. In addition to all of those things that I mentioned, then you have generational trauma. You have epigenetic stuff that's not even yours. So then you have to know who it is that you're working with. This is a big part of what I do. I have a assessment program, software that I work with. It's called Voice Bio. It's also known as Voice Analysis Harmony, to see vibrationally where a person is. And each one of there's like a voice print, and there are bars that correspond to various energetic systems in the body. And then, of course, that gives a picture, if you will. And once again, this is a photograph. It's not going to be the same probably earlier in the day and later in the day, but it gives through 3 different questions that my clients are asked. It will give 3 different pictures, and then there will be a composite of those 3 different energies, if you will, or perspectives into one chart voice print. And that becomes kind of, I guess you could say, it averages out all of those. Now, why is this important? Because there are some people who are very intuitive. I'm intuitive, but I haven't developed that. I know that I am, and it's not very intentional, if you will. Which, by the way, intention is another vibration. But, it would be the kind of thing that, would pop up once in a while for me, that I would, oh yeah, oh wow, that happened. I didn't realize that happened. That's pretty amazing that happened. And of course, everything in life is amazing, but then it shows me that I do have that intuitive nature. However, most people aren't, like myself, and I will include myself in that, are not necessarily trained to the highest, to be that highest vision of oneself intuitively. So this is why it's so nice to have an assessment program, because that assessment program gives a clear picture of what's going on. And it's very valid, and it gives you consistent results that over and over again. So this is one of the reasons that I felt that it was very important for me to work with this program, because what I saw in myself, and I see a lot of people who do not just sound healing work, but it can be homeopathy, and it can be Bach flowers, whatever a person works with, herbs. A lot of times it's anecdotal. A person will say, this is what's happened to me. This is how I'm feeling. What do you want to work in? Well, I have a lot of anxiety, so on and so forth. But it's nice to have a tool, because then if I have a tool and I get a clear picture, I will know what protocols to carry out, what to suggest.
Yeah.
You think about anxiety, where's that coming from?
Right.
Once again, is it coming from childhood trauma? Is it coming from epigenetical problems? I don't know if that's a word, epigenetics, but it's epigenetics. I don't know if epigenetical is a word. So anyway, wherever that anxiety is coming from, once again, it can be because they were stuck in traffic today. It could be they don't like cold weather and they're very cold. It could be they got into a fight with their spouse. It could be they have some issues happening with their health, somebody else's health that they know. You don't know where that's coming from. So just to simply say, I want to work on anxiety without getting to the root cause, the source. And that's pretty much the type of practitioner I am, is that I want to the best of my ability, get to the root cause and the source. Then I know how to approach that in a better manner.
I see.
So this is a very, so that's the first step. And then the first step is to do the assessment. And then there are after I read the voice print, and then I will make suggestions based on that. And there's a whole page that I have for each bar in the voice print. So those people who know anything about music, essentially, and you don't have to know anything about music to understand there's black and white keys. And when you do the voice print, it corresponds to what we call the chromatic scale, which are all of the white and black keys. So if I were to play them one after another, it would sound like that would be it. So this would be C, this would be C sharp, this would be D, so on and so forth. And each one of those would correspond to, let's say, for instance, the right kidney, the left kidney, the adrenal glands, the thymus and the pancreas, so on and so forth. This is how it works. And then based on, there's not going to be a smooth graph, if you will. There are going to be higher, and people can go on my website and see a sample voice print to understand how this works. And that there are going to be some bars that are very high. They're going to be color coded also. Some are going to be high, some are going to be very low. And of course, you can't do everything at once. By the way, the ones that are too high usually indicate some kind of inflammation, infection, some kind of aggravation, and those need to be brought down. Okay. And a person who has very low, and in many cases to no energy coming through certain areas, say for instance in their kidneys, very, very little energy, then of course we want to build those up. And it's a process, ongoing process, that the first time that we meet for a session, we'll tackle the two lowest frequencies and make recommendations. The recommendations, suggestions will be music, not only music, but it will be lifestyle changes. It will be foods and juices that can be of a benefit. It can be gemstones, it can be colors, it can be Bach flowers, it can be all kinds of things to help to build up those low frequencies. And then of course, was there a question there?
Yeah, this is really fascinating when we talk about the voice print, because I was wondering as I was listening to you at first, if we want to bring people to a steady place, right? One note, one place, but there's more intricacies to this, right? When you work on specific areas of health in the body or emotional health, it sounds like we want to work on them separately, not just we want to bring the person to one resonant place over and over.
That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, because another thing that happens is that for the low frequencies, there is an emotional equivalency that goes along with that. So a person who will have a low frequency in D will have a certain emotional corresponding behavior that goes along with that. So it's very, very fascinating. And that emotional behavior is actually a way in which we, once again, the word intuitively, try to build up that particular frequency. So the behavior is in an effort, it's an intuitive effort to try to build that up. So this is exactly right. Here's another thing that this program kind of steps outside the norm, the narrative, if you will, and that is the chakra system. Is that because the chakra system is such that people have this very neat, the Muladhara is C, and Svadhisthana is D, and E is the solar plexus, and the heart is F, F sharp, and so on and so forth. And it's not neat that way. And what I mean by neat is energies, and you think about this logically, it's not like the universe, we were not designed so that that bottom chakra is C and that's all it is. And everything is C in that area. That's just not how we are. So if you think of it more or less on a 5D level, there are kinds of frequencies everywhere throughout, and they're not distributed in like this, I don't know, lack of a better word right now, is this militaristic form, just like boom, then we move. But this is another thing that I teach even my students, at Globe Institute, is you think about the seasons. Our chakra system is like the seasons. Our seasons don't just conveniently jump from summer and then go right into fall. That's not how it works. There's nothing that way. And even I would say this with the music system that we have, okay? We have these half steps, but that's a tuning system that's been contrived. This is a contrived system, meaning that it was made to fit neatly into 12 different packages, octave after octave. But the overtone series, which I call, going back to the introduction, I call the DNA of frequency and DNA of sound, particularly with frequency-based sounds, is that every single thing that creates a frequency, whether it's my voice, your voice, a dolphin, a wolf, whatever, a whale, everything has proportionately the same intervals, if you will, of that system, of that sequence. So otherwise, the overtone series starts with what you call a fundamental, and then you have what's called an octave, which is the very next pitch. And then you have the fifth, and then you have the fourth, and you have the third, you have another minor third, another minor third, so on and so forth. Now that system exists exactly the same way for anything and everything. It's the most amazing thing you've ever, in life. It really is, as I said before, the DNA of sound, because it doesn't deviate from that exact proportional structure. Everything, always. There's no. Go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm just saying that it's fascinating. It kind of reminds me of the Fibonacci sequence, that it's in everything, right?
That's exactly right. Very, 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 very good. That's exactly right. So therefore, and there are some people, some practitioners who are what you call quote unquote purist. And by the way, this is called equal tempered tuning, and it's the tuning that actually some people say was a political decision, because and you hear people talk about 432, and I want to clarify this for people who might be a little bit confused about this, because 432, for instance, is what is considered to be the pure, just tuning frequency in which we should be tuning to. That's all it is. 432 is not in and of itself, by itself, an auspicious frequency. It's not. See, that's where people miss that, but that's once again because people might not know. You can throw anything on. People say, well, this is the frequency of the heart, and this is the frequency of that, and 432, and they will embed it in music. Now, for instance, you have 440, which is the basic tuning system in the Western culture. And then you have 432, which people say we should be using. But then throughout the world, depending on cultures, once again, getting more back to the native cultures, they may use an entirely different tuning system. And between two notes that we would consider to be clashing, and we would jump from this note to this note. In some cultures, that tuning, there's many notes in between those two notes, which is a whole nother story. So I'm just saying that as a way of helping people to understand that 432 by itself is not auspicious. It's not. I have a whole chart of frequencies based on vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and even stuff like arsenic, things that are toxic and poison. And everything has a vibration, everything has a frequency. You know, whether we measure it or not, it's there. So we have to be very, very careful. Going back to what I said about the assessment, if you don't know what you're working with, you can cause harm. So I did actually a presentation at the, not this past International Sound Healing Conference, but a few years ago. And the title of my presentation was Do No Harmony. And it's the kind of thing that for people who are health practitioners to understand that you just can't do anything with a person and think that's okay. A story I told 1,000 times is at that particular conference, a person bought a crystal bowl, and the crystal bowl was G. I did her voice print. Her G was very high. The G was familiar to her, but it was the last thing that she needed. She did not need that particular frequency. And remember, I said before, in the voice print, when you actually have a high frequency in that voice print, it's some kind of inflammation, infection, aggravation, whatever. So you have to be careful. So I would say that if you are working with a sound therapist, and hopefully it will be me, you want to make sure you ask and know, what do I need? What, you know, sometimes you're going to need more of something. Sometimes you're going to need less of something. Sometimes you're doing fine, just leave it alone, you know. But you know, we as human beings, and I have a saying that we're human beings and not human doings, because we always want to do something, you know, we have to be doing something, you know.
Yeah.
And
That's how our world is, right? Our world is.
yes, yes. And doing something is okay because we are naturally creative. You know, we're creative beings, you know, that's just a big part of who we are, and what we're here to do is to create and manifest. That's a beautiful thing. But you know, sometimes things are okay and you can just leave it alone. So these are the things, you know, diet, lifestyle, juices, music, bach flowers, oil essences, you know, all of these kind of things are important for helping to balance. And then, as I said before, you know, the quality of the food, if you're able to eat the highest quality of food possible, that is vibrational. Being around people that love you and you love them, that's very vibrational. Thinking positive thoughts, vibrational. You know, and of course you don't want to fool yourself, but you have to figure out a way to feel as best as you can all the time, in spite of circumstances, because we're going to either create, and going back to what I just said a moment ago about being creative beings, we're either going to create intentionally or quote unquote by accident. But it's not really by accident, it's just going to be the outcome of what we've done. And we are the ones who have those decisions. We can make those decisions. We can make the decisions about who we're with. We can make decisions about what we think about. We can make decisions about the words that we speak. You know, all of these things are very, very, very important. We can make the decisions about the fabrics that we wear. And I put all of these things in under the umbrella of health and wellness, which music is a part of it, because once again, music, and I'm sure you both are familiar with Hidden Messages in Water. Are you familiar?
Sally Monka's, work, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, that's just proof that the words we speak, what we think, you know, we're emitting a vibration all the time. All the time, you know, that's not something, as long as we are living in these bodies, and then when we're not in the bodies, we're emanating an energy that's on a higher plane. So it's the kind of thing that we are always alive and we're always vibrating at some type of frequency, whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. All of those things are going to be important in the journey. And then now regarding music, there's important things that we can incorporate into our life. One thing that I just discovered, I retired in June, and believe this or not, I like to be honest and humble and say that I just discovered Spotify after I graduated. And you notice I say graduated, and I say that often when I'm talking about retirement, I say graduated. So I graduated from a job.
Love that.
Thank you. So and so people can have playlists. You know, you can create playlists for yourself. It's important to relax. It's important to get the energy going. It's important to dance. It's very, very important to dance. Once again, when you get the energy moving, you dance, and especially if it's to your best music that you really love, you're going to be happy. You know, sometimes it's like the music can transport you back to a special person, whether that be a lover or a child or a grandparent or being out in nature, whatever it may be. You know, but it's important. That's a tool that people can use. Is dancing. This is something that a lot of sound therapists that I don't know anybody who sees that as a very important aspect. And another thing is romance. You know, whatever level of romance that may be, you know, whether it's a new relationship, it's the end of a relationship, reconnecting with a long lost love, intimacy, you know, all of those things are very important to incorporate vibrationally into one's life. So this is another level of what I do. So music it's broad, music and sound. Now, I'm talking about right now structured music that people write and then of course people appreciate. I talked about earlier with the church experience when you actually have an opportunity to sing bhajans or mantras with people. You know, I know there are some churches even, I don't know if you're familiar with or not, they do Taizé services. And the Taizé services were created by monks from, and I can't recall where they're from, but they're very simple sung, what they call sung prayers. And people just sing, and they're very short and sweet, and people can repeat those. Repetitions, as I remember I talked about earlier on, repetition is very, very important because it holds a space of security and expectation. When you are repeating something and you think about mantras and you think about chants and they're just repeated over and over again, you think about funk music, think about dance music. It's repeated. The repetition is very, very important because that way people don't have to think so hard about it. They know what to expect, anticipate, and they can get deeper and deeper into whatever the musical experience is. Question or something?
Yeah. First of all, I never thought of it. So thank you for bringing that up. That's like a big thing, what you just brought up. But what I wanted to ask is, I have two questions. One is, can someone do the print that you do of the voice? Can they do it?
Oh, online?
Over line? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's important. And just curious, so when you buy something, and probably more cotton than not, do you take the print of it? How do you
No,
measure?
I haven't done that yet. Actually, this is something that I just recently discovered, and it always made sense to me. Now, throughout my life of awareness, I'll put it that way, when I started to become conscious about a lot of things, I understood to wear cotton to the best of my ability. I would try always, and most of what I own is cotton. And then linen, I always loved linen, but now I understand this research has been done in which linen has a very high vibration. And so this is something that I'm going to explore more and more. And I'm also interested in fabrics such as wool, for instance, that come from another creature.
Yeah.
You know, and vibrationally what that is. So this is a place where I am in my research and study because it's just taking me to another level. You know, plastics are something that I've always tried to stay away from. Even like I store my food, I always want to store my food in glass, you know, or ceramic or something like that. But these are just, so that was what my, you were talking about my topic for the International Sound Healing Conference. It just deal with the whole life ceremony. You know, using sound and music for the whole life ceremony. because that's what's important. That's the next level, I think, as sound therapy as a practice, which is becoming quite reputable. There's a lot of research. People are using it for in hospitals and in schools. You know, all of these things are very, very important. And as it continues to grow, then it expands in the knowledge base, because what we're talking about is not just simply music and sound and frequency. Frequency is something that's applicable to much more than music and sound, much bigger. And you can't escape those things and just do sound, because what you may, I was just talking to a friend last night, for instance, we were talking about artificial sweeteners. Okay, so what happened is that we went from, I saw the look on your face. So we went from cane sugar, you know, and some places maple syrup, and then we eventually came to this polished, you know, white sugar. And then we eventually found ourselves, when the sugar tariffs got so high, then it became about high fructose corn syrup. Very, very toxic, very, very glycemic index through the roof. And that's in so much stuff. I mean, it's in so much, you know, what you're talking about, soft drinks or candy or soda pop or whatever. But then what happened is the brilliant human beings that live on this planet wanted to come up with something else. And then they brought in rat poisoning to sweeten, you know, they brought in the aspartame and the Splenda. And, you know, you think about vibrationally, those things are not natural at all. They cause a lot of harm. So if you're, once again, if I'm doing an assessment and a person is drinking a lot of diet soda, you know, that's the word diet. It's so funny because, you know, it used to be that, you know, they would talk about people who were overweight and it was the fat, and then they found out it was the sugar. But then after the sugar, they said, oh, well, we'll fix it. We won't have any sugar. We'll have Splenda and we'll have aspartame. And even though it may damage your nervous system, you know, at least you won't be gaining weight, you know, whatever. But it's really, you know, I jest, but at the same time, I'm very serious, because this is the kind of thing, as you're working with people, once again, going back to sound being a part of holistic health and wellness, you're not going to necessarily just do sound and not know how the person is eating. Is the person getting outside into nature? Do they have toxic people in their life? Are they sitting watching television all the time, you know? I actually I got rid of my television last year. And it's been one of the best decisions I ever made, because I couldn't take the propaganda, and there were no choices of what I was really interested in. You know, what I really, you know, it's okay. There's 500 choices, none of which I want to make, you know? So, you know, you have to look at the whole picture, the holistic person. And then the question you asked about fabrics and what you wear. You know, how are you thinking? What are you putting? And, you know, and I have to say this, and this will be a presentation I'm in the process of doing, and that is, it will be called Pretty Without Poison. And it's primarily geared towards women who, through what you put on your hair, what you put on your skin, what you put on your lips, what you put under your arms. And of course, that is also applicable to men as well, you know, some of these products. But that has an enormous impact, because what you can't eat, what they will not allow you to eat, they will allow you to put on your body, but your body is semi-permeable. So whatever you put on your body goes into your body. You know, this is something that people just are not taught or don't think about, you know? So all of these things are important. So as I said before, it's much, much more than sound, music. I know a lot about sound, music, and frequency. I know a whole lot about it, but I also recognize that that's only a piece. One last thing, and that is sounds of nature. And so people are very, very drawn to just being in nature, not just to be with the trees and to breathe air and hear the leaves rustle, but you know, there's lots of sounds in nature that people find very healing. And of course, there are a lot of people who create, you know, you can find things online even where people have wolf sounds, that are put to music, or waterfalls and different forms of water, whether it be a brook, or a small waterfall, a big waterfall, or rain. All of these kind of things are very healing to people. So that's a whole nother level of the work.
Yeah. I wonder if they measure differently. A brook and a big waterfall, do they measure differently on
Well,
the?
these kind of events in nature are primarily like white noise. And the thing about white noise is it contains all frequencies.
Oh, interesting.
And that is one thing, like, so people have like these white noise boxes, which they're I don't know if you're familiar with those or not, but they're nice because they, even though it's quote unquote artificial, it gives the effect in the mind, a person can get the same effect as being out in nature. And so people, even with fans, for instance, they will have on fans as a way of providing white noise to eat up some of the frequencies of maybe the traffic outside, or a dog that keeps barking, or whatever it may be, that's distracting them from being able to rest at night. Yes.
Right.
So that's kind of like waterfalls and those kind of things are more like white noise. They're not a specific frequency. And that's why I was saying earlier about the DNA of sound corresponding, being the same for everything that creates a frequency, a specific frequency.
Yeah. That's like a whole study. It's a big subject, isn't it? Wow.
It is. But the important thing is to and I don't know if you saw the whole presentation I did, which was so much. I tried to get through it and make it as condensed as possible. But there's so many arenas of life, and I would just simply say for people, as a starting point, is just to break down things into places and spaces of their life. Their emotional space, their mental space, their social space at home and in the workplace, or socially, when they're socializing, whether a coffee shop, or, they're out dancing or whatever. And then to also look at what it is that you eat, look at the source of where it came from vibrationally. In this country, unfortunately, the soil has been depleted so much because of big agri, continuing to plow the same land over and over again. So it strips so much of the nutrients. And then we have you have Monsanto, and you have glyphosate, and then I'm thoroughly convinced that a lot of that, what people call gluten intolerance, is because of glyphosate. Because they can go to Europe and they can eat wheat, and it's not such a big deal because it's a different standard.
Yes, I agree with you. Absolutely.
It's a whole different standard. Even, it's like, when and I've traveled to Europe quite a bit, and I would go into the stores just out of curiosity, because I'm a vegan. I've been plant-based for a very long time. But I would look at the wrappers of candy bars in Europe as opposed to here. And here they would be high fructose corn syrup.
Right.
And there in Europe, wherever it's like Budapest, they would be sugar.
Yeah.
And the companies know this, but the companies have to go along with the culture. And then from my understanding, there's high tariffs on sugar here. I guess that was the initial quote unquote excuse that was being used as to why high fructose corn syrup was being used so much. But the whole point being is, when we're talking vibration, that's a very, very important thing to consider.
Absolutely.
Everything, and that's the important thing, is everything has a vibration. And how close is that vibration to its regular space in nature? When you have something in nature, how much is changed by the time it gets to you? And how much is changed while in the growing process?
Yeah.
And then this is also a thing in music that's happening with music now. When I was a child, I remember Alvin. Do you guys know Alvin and the Chipmunks?
Yeah.
Okay, so like, you remember Alvin and Chipmunks was fun, and it had this little squeaky sound because these little cute chipmunks. But now they're making music like that. So it's like they have that chipmunky sound, and you see all of these people using it on TikTok, and
Right.
and you think about how, once again, getting away from the nature, the natural music, and of course we have recordings understood, used to be cassette tapes and it was CDs, and then now we have MP3s, and you have Spotify. So, but this music is not necessarily in its purest form. You don't have people playing in bands, playing instruments as much, which is a very important part that I believe is important for children to continue to have music in schools. They sing together, they play instruments together, and they create music and experience music as a community. So this is another thing, so the purity of whatever it is that we take into our bodies, into our ears, into our minds, into our eyes, on our bodies, all of these things make up a vibrational world that we have to be more and more aware of so that we live our highest vibrational life.
I so agree with you, and I wish that our educational system will start with this education, so that our kids can know to differentiate between what is good for them and what is not good for them, and how to choose the right foods, the right music, all of that you've spoken about is so important.
Yeah.
Thank you for educating us so much. I really enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right, thank you very much. So once again, if people would like to get in touch with me, www.soundpill.net. The email is soundpill@soundpill.net.
Thank you. And we will add it at the bottom when we release it, so people will have it as well.
Okay, and thank you once again for having me here. I hope that I've been a help giving people good information.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, I can't wait to explore more of what you said and be in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You both be well.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
All right.